Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing happy, amazing and positive as always. As Halloween is coming up, I thought I would bring you guys another true crime case. And guys, be prepared. Like, this is graphic. So I feel like I need to give my disclaimer right now that this case is super gory, super graphic, super violent, and a lot of really horrific details. So please guys, if this is not your thing, click out right now. I've got a lot more lighthearted content that you can enjoy. This video is purely for educational purposes to bring awareness to these sort of crimes. Also, I do understand that not all pieces of information will be 100% accurate because I have collected my information from the internet, through documentaries, through news reports, things of that nature. So like I said, I know that it won't be 100% accurate, but I've done my best to provide as accurate information as possible. So today's case is about Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris, also very infamously known as the Toolbox Killers. Lawrence Bittaker was born on the 27th of September 1940 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in America. And Roy Norris was born on the 5th of February in 1948 in Greeley, Colorado, also in America. The pair met and became quite close while they were serving time in jail. And when they got out, the pair together, they abducted and killed and raped about 5 girls who were the ages of 13 to 18 years old. Now, I say this very lightly because there could have well and truly been more than 5 girls, but whether that number is more has never been fully confirmed. They committed these acts over a period of 5 months in 1979. The two are considered some of the worst American serial killers to date. Not just serial killers, but rapists and abductors as well. There are audio tapes of these crimes that have never been released to the public because they are so horrific that they have been described as hell. To think about how horrible these audio tapes could be, I could not even fathom. Now, you may be wondering why they're called the Toolbox Killers. And that is because the pair would use toolbox items to kill and torture their victims. They would use ice picks, they would use sledgehammers, they would use pliers, all of the things that you would find in a normal household toolbox. They would kill their very last victim on Halloween night in 1979. Let's start off with Lawrence Bittaker. Lawrence was the result of an unplanned pregnancy. His parents did not want kids, so when his mother gave birth, his biological parents decided to put him up for adoption. And when he was put up for adoption, he was then adopted by Mr. and Mrs. George Bittica. George Bittica worked in aviation factories, so like aircraft factories, and because his job was so full on, the family would have to move around the states quite a lot, and there was just no stable home for a very long time. The family would just have to kind of pack up, pick up and move, pack up, pick up and move, and this was kind of a bit unsettling for Lawrence because there was no like that concrete foundation of a home. So because of this, the family moved around in 4 different states where they eventually settled in California. Apparently Lawrence was quite intelligent, which when you actually learn more about this case, that's questionable. I'm like, how are you super intelligent? He had the IQ of 138, which is like almost classified as a genius. Despite how intelligent he was, he actually dropped out of school at the age of 17 because he found school to be very boring and really could not be bothered with it. So he was like, bye, I am no longer doing this. But by the time he had already dropped out of school at 17, he had already been arrested countless amount of times for petty crimes. So at this stage, it was mostly like shoplifting and that kind of thing. He was super rebellious. The first time he ever got arrested was at the age of 12. And, you know, it started off as very small things, petty crimes, and then gradually with each crime that he committed, it just became worse and worse. So after he dropped out of school, this is when he's already had a whole list of arrests and crimes. He then went on to do bigger things, like I said, like auto theft, evading arrest, fleeing a hit and run scene, and he actually went to jail for these crimes. So he was in jail for about a year until he was about 18 years old, and then he was released. Literally days after he had been released from jail, he got arrested again for another theft. He was sentenced to 18 months in jail, but then because he was behaving really well, they transferred him to a medical facility because they were like, okay, like obviously there's something not right with this guy. He keeps committing all these crimes. He keeps coming back to jail. He keeps getting arrested. Like, what's going on with him? So when he got released from the medical facility, he went back home and he realized that his adoptive parents, where he was going to go back home to, actually left the state of California. He also discovered the reason that his parents moved away is because they just disowned him. They were like, he is way too rebellious. He is too much. Always in trouble. We cannot deal with this. He was like 20 at this point, so he was obviously considered an adult. So they were like, he can stand on his own 2 feet. We are leaving. And then from then on, Lawrence never saw his adoptive parents ever again. A short time later, in 1960, he was again arrested for a robbery in LA. He was sentenced to 1 to 15 years in prison. While he was in prison, they did a psychiatric evaluation on him because, like I said, they were like, what is wrong with this guy? And that evaluation actually concluded that he was a paranoid person. And it also concluded that he was borderline psychotic and manipulative. He was released in 1963 after just serving 3 years of his sentence, and he was out on parole. And then once again, 2 months later, he was arrested again. And this was because he violated his parole and also on suspicion of robbery. You know, you're seeing a pattern here. He's arrested, taken to jail, going back to jail, arrested. So, you know, this kind of thing was happening for a long time. One of his last arrests was actually in a supermarket parking lot where he attempted to shoplift a piece of steak. And as he was trying to flee, as he was trying to escape from the supermarket, there was an employer there in the parking lot. The employer was trying to stop him, and then Lawrence just stabbed him. So then he was convicted of attempted murder because of this stabbing, and then again was taken to jail where he served time in California Men's Colony. And while he was serving this sentence, this is where he met Roy Norris. Now this brings me to Roy Norris. Roy's parents actually conceived him outside of wedlock, and when this happened, especially back then, this was considered as kind of like a taboo thing, like you shouldn't be doing that. So because she actually conceived him out of wedlock, his parents actually decided to get married just to avoid, you know, being looked at funny by society. So not because they actually genuinely wanted to get married, but it was just because of society. Roy also had a younger sister as well. Roy's father worked in a scrapyard and his mum was a stay-at-home mum, but unfortunately she was actually also a drug addict. And this obviously was not healthy, you know. And because of this, and also just like the abusive nature of his family, the emotional abuse that he endured, he was occasionally placed back and forth from foster home to foster home, and then sometimes he would be taken back home to live with his parents. It was as non-structural as you could get. It was just so back and forth, and he did not have a safe place to go. And even in foster care, he was actually treated really, really poorly. You know, he was often neglected. Some of his foster carers denied giving him enough food and enough clothing. and it was just a really tough time, especially for such a young kid. He also claimed that he was sexually abused by a Hispanic family, and because this was done by a Hispanic family, he held a high prejudice against Hispanic people in general. When Roy turned 16, this was when he was living with his parents. His family and him went to visit some relatives, and at this house was a female relative who was in her early 20s. And when Roy sat down to talk to her, he started talking to her in a very sexually explicit, sexually suggestive manner, and the female relative, was so uncomfortable. She was like, you need to get out of my house right now. And she told her dad, and her dad threatened to beat Roy up. So this was kind of like the first time he was doing things sexually and making people really, really uncomfortable. Roy was deeply traumatized. Roy was deeply depressed and actually tried to commit suicide by injecting pure air into his veins. But obviously it was unsuccessful. His parents, like I said, were emotionally abusive and verbally said to Roy and his little sister, you guys are unwanted. As soon as you guys turn 18, me and your father are divorcing. His upbringing was super like, he was dealing with quite a lot of abuse, and to deal with abuse from your parents, like that's on a whole nother level. He dropped out of school at 17 years old and then joined the Navy. And then in November 1969 is where he was first arrested. And that was because he went into a vehicle of a woman who was on her own. He literally like tried to get in her vehicle and attempted to rape her. So he was arrested for that. And then he made bail, and 3 months later he was arrested again. And this was because he went to a woman's house and he tried to get her to allow him in. I don't know what he was saying, but he was trying to deceive this woman into letting him in. And she was like, no, I do not even know you. Like, you are not allowed in my house. And once she kind of declined this, he started to actually like force himself in. And he was doing this because he had the intention of going in and raping this woman. And while he was trying to break and enter, the woman actually called the police. So luckily, before any harm was done, the police had gotten to the scene and arrested him. And then 3 months after this incident, he was actually put under psychiatric evaluation, just as Lawrence was. But for Roy, it was actually the military psychologist. And he did this extensive evaluation on him. And then with that evaluation, he was diagnosed with schizoid personality disorder. And because of this, the Navy actually discharged him because they were like, you're mentally unfit to be in the Navy. And then the following year in May, he was stalking this woman from uni. Like, he was literally like stalking her. She was a student at this uni, and he was like walking around campus, like keeping an eye on her. And he actually approached her and almost killed her. He hit her head repeatedly with a rock, and he smashed her head into the pavement while he was like on her lower back, like laying on her lower back, and he was just like smashing her head in. Thankfully, this woman survived. But because she had survived, his charge was reduced just to assault. I mean, in my opinion, it should have been attempted murder, but hey. And instead of going to like a proper prison, he was put into a psychiatric institution. 5 years later, in 1975, he was released because they deemed him as a non-threat to society. And after he was released, you'd think 5 years in a mental institution would kind of help somehow, but it didn't, because just 3 months later, he approached this woman. She was walking home from a restaurant and he was on his motorbike, and he offered her a ride, and she declined. She's like, I don't know you, I'm not going to sit at the back of your motorbike. So then he got really mad and he parked his motorbike a little way up from where she was, and then he walked up to her. She was wearing a scarf. He grabbed it and twisted it around her neck to try and strangle her. And then he told her that he wanted to rape her. So he dragged her into a nearby bushy area and he raped her. She was so scared for her life, but she didn't resist the rape. She kind of accepted that this was happening, and she tried not to resist because this could have further aggravated him. She reported this incident to the police, And they kind of searched for a month for this perpetrator, but they couldn't find him. Like, they didn't even know who he was. They couldn't identify him. But then after a month, the victim actually remembered his motorbike and license plate. And because of this, the police were able to identify Roy. And then they found him and arrested him. And then he was convicted a year later. This time when he went to jail, this is where he met Lawrence. So Lawrence is jail. He's in jail. It was like a twist in fate for the two of them. Roy said that he was quite loyal to Lawrence because he had tried to commit suicide 2 times, but Lawrence had saved his life. Now, while in jail, the two of them, you know, they didn't really know each other. They didn't really know each other straight away. But as they kind of met and got talking, they realized that they had the same sadistic fantasies. And they kind of formed this really sick and twisted duo and partnership, if you want to call it that. And while they're sharing their sick fantasies, the two of them made a plan that when they would get out of jail, they would rape and torture local girls. Keyword, girls. And then they also planned that after they would rape and torture them, they would kill them so that there was lesser chance of being caught. And they disgustingly agreed to this. They thought it was a great idea to do this as soon as they got out of jail. Lawrence was the first one to get released, and when he was released, he got a job as a mechanic in LA. And then Roy, just 2 months later, he also got paroled and was released, and he got a job as an electrician. He went back and lived with his mother. And then in 1975, the two would connect and reignite their friendship, and that is when they started acting out this plan that they had made together in jail. So in order to do what they had planned to do, they needed a van. So Lawrence went and bought a white van. It was a 1977 GMC cargo van, which sickly, disgustingly, they named as the Murder Mac. It was literally just a game to them. They were so dedicated to the sinister plan that they had that they went and bought a van. Sorry, I have my fan because it's really hot. This van was the typical serial killer vibe. Like, you know, you see some of these vans on the road when you're outside, out and about, and you're like, oh, that looks like a pedophile van, or that looks like a serial killer van. It was like the typical van, you know, that you're scared of. No windows, just a big sliding door on the passenger side. Like one of those vans that you're scared to walk past because you're scared someone's in there that they can just take you. Like I know when I go for walks, I'm scared of that because it's like you don't know who's inside. There's no windows to see inside. So from February of 1979 to June of 1979, at first they would kind of just like drive around looking at girls, trying to talk to them, trying to flirt with them. They would like stop at beaches. They would mainly drive around in beaches because mainly these girls would be in their swimsuits, you know, bikinis, and this is what they wanted to see. And it was so disgusting that they would go and do that to perv on these young girls. They had a Polaroid camera as well, and they would sometimes take pictures of girls and with girls. They had no shame in what they were doing. They did not care. They just wanted these pictures. And during this time of doing that, they would take about 500 Polaroid pictures with young girls. Some with them knowing and some without them knowing. This was kind of like, I feel like they were just warming up to what they were about to do. This was just a test run. This was just to get a feel of what it would be like. So then on the 24th of June, that is when it went from gross perviness to full-blown like evil. This is the day that they claimed their first victim. Now, they had pre-planned where they were going to take their victims. They found this fire road, this like kind of like abandoned road that no one would go to on San Gabriel Mountains. They had found this gate with a lock on it, and they wanted to go past this gate where no one would go and kill, torture, and rape their victims so no one could see. So on this gate where the lock was, Lawrence was like, okay, well, we can't go in with this lock. So he broke the lock. This is how dedicated they were. They broke the lock. Lawrence went out to get his own lock and replaced the original lock with his lock. So he had the key and he was able to enter in and out whenever he wanted. So on the 24th of June, they finished constructing a bed. Like, they made a bed in the back of their van to do what they were going to do. Underneath the bed, they placed a toolbox with all the tools in it. They placed a cooler with beer and soft drinks, and they also put clothes there as well. At 11 a.m, they set out to go to Redondo Beach. Now, remember, this is where they would go. This is where they would claim their victims, by going to these beaches. At first, they drank beer, they smoked marijuana, flirted with the girls during the day. And around 7:46 p.m, literally almost like 9 hours of being at this beach, they spotted a girl called Lucinda. Lucinda was a 16-year-old girl who was leaving a church meeting. She was walking down a side street, and then Roy turns to Lawrence and says, oh, you know, there's a cute little blonde. And they would agree that this would be their first victim. When they got to her, they offered her a ride home, and they also offered her weed. And she was like, no, I'm not going to get in with you guys. I don't know you guys. I'm happy to just go home my own way. So then the guys were like, okay, that's fine. But they were not going to take no for an answer. The two then drove just a little ahead of where Lucinda was. They parked the van, and Roy gets out and opens the side passenger sliding door and pretends to like do something in the van, like pretends to fix something. He kind of leans in where you can't see his shoulders and his head. He then waited for Lucinda to pass the van. As he realized that she was passing, he turned around, grabbed her, and as he was dragging her to the van, one of her shoes actually fell off and fell on the pavement. Then he grabbed her, put her in the van along with himself. While Lawrence is driving off to the secluded area that they had pre-planned, Roy was in the back duct taping her mouth and tying her arms and legs. They went to the fire road near the mountains where they had pre-planned, and they both took turns in raping her. Roy would tell Lawrence to go take a walk for an hour while he would rape Lucinda. And then Lawrence would come back after an hour, and then Roy would go off on his walk for an hour while Lawrence raped her. The saddest thing about this is that Lucinda was so calm during this. You know, she accepted that this was happening to her, and she accepted that she had no control over what was happening to her. She was completely overpowered by these two men. She asked them, "Are you gonna kill me?" And then Roy said, "No, we're not going to kill you." And then she said, "Well, if you guys are planning on killing me, please allow me to pray before you do." Oh, when I read that bit, like my heart just sank. Lawrence and Roy argued over whether to kill this woman. Roy was kind of like not wanting to kill her, but Lawrence was like, we need to kill her. Like, we're going to get caught. She's going to talk if we let her go. So they were arguing back and forth about the decision. So then they decided, okay, we're gonna have to kill her. So then Roy starts to strangle her. And as he's doing so, he's looking at her in the face. And she has this facial expression that Roy just could not deal with. So around 45 seconds later, as he's looking at this woman's facial expressions, he's like, I can't do this. And it made him physically sick, where he released her from his grip and ran to the front of the van and threw up, because he just felt like he could not go through with killing her. He said that there was just something about the look on her face, the look in her eyes, that he just couldn't bring himself to do it. So then Lawrence took over and started strangling her. So he's strangling her with his hands. Then Lucinda falls to the ground while she is temporarily collapsed. And also her body starts like convulsing. And then Lawrence decides that he wants to go a step further by going ahead and torturing her. He decides to further torture her with a coat hanger. He gets a coat hanger, straightens it out, and ties it around her neck. And then he goes into the toolbox and gets a pair of pliers, where then he starts tightening the coat hanger with the pliers to the point where she could no longer breathe and she died from strangulation. To go ahead and even think of something like this, to even think about like torturing this woman further in this way, this was pure playtime for him. He was maximizing his fun while he was doing this. And I don't know, like I just found this so sad, but they didn't even allow her to pray like she had requested. The one thing that would have made her feel at peace during this time? They said no to. To dispose the body, they got a plastic shower curtain. They wrapped her body and threw her over a canyon. And Lawrence kind of reassured Roy, saying, oh, don't worry about it. Like, animals are gonna eat her, so there's gonna be no evidence. Don't worry about it. All they really cared about was like, okay, as long as we don't get caught, I don't care. They were just like, okay, get rid of it, and that's it. We're never gonna be caught for this. So then, you know, the pair go off and live their life, their best life, you know, acting as if they never even did what they did. And then a couple of weeks after their first victim, on July the 8th, they claimed their second victim. And this girl was an 18-year-old girl called Andrea Hall. Andrea was hitchhiking. Remember, back then, like, hitchhiking was a very kind of common thing. Nowadays, obviously, after all these serial killers and stuff, it's not done as much. Like, you will not see it done that much. But back then, it was a very normal and common thing. So she's hitchhiking and Lawrence spots her and he thinks, bingo, perfect. So he approaches her and he's the one driving, and Roy is hanging out in the back, hiding, waiting for her to enter the van. So, you know, they would have formed a little plan in the van, like, you know, Roy, you get in the back, wait for her. So when Lawrence offers Andrea a ride, Andrea agreed. So then when she gets in, Lawrence offers her a drink from the cooler that they had placed in the back. And remember, Andrea has no idea that there's another man in the back. She just thinks it's this guy, Lawrence. So Andrea's like, yeah, sure, I'll take a drink. She goes to the back of the van and went to grab a drink from the cooler. Roy was hiding behind the bed, and she did not spot him at this time. So as she goes to grab a drink, Roy jumps out at her. She was fighting back. She's like, what's happening? You know, fighting back, trying to get out of the situation. But Roy overpowered her. He twisted her arm to the back and grabbed a hold of her in that way. You know, Andrew's screaming in pain. She is in so much pain by getting her arm twisted like that. She is scared. And Roy does not give her mercy. Like he did with Lucinda, he tapes Andrea's mouth and bound her arms and legs. They then drove to the area that they would do this in San Gabriel Mountain, and that is where the two of them raped Andrea. Each of them raped her one time, and then Lawrence went to rape her the second time, and while he's doing so, he thinks that he sees a pair of headlights. So he kind of freaks out. So he like closed her mouth shut and took her to a nearby bush to get a better view of the vehicle to see if there was actually someone coming. But he couldn't see anyone approaching, so he takes Andrea back to the van. After he took her back to the van, he then forces her to walk uphill naked. And when they get further up to the hill, he forces Andrea to perform sexual acts on him. After this, he told Andrea to pose for Polaroid pictures and took a series of pictures with her and of her. Then they drove to a third location. When they got to the third location, Roy got out to buy some alcohol, and when he returned, he noticed that Andrea was gone, and he found Lawrence looking at the Polaroid pictures that they had just taken of Andrea and him. Then Lawrence informed Roy of what he had just done to Andrea. He said that he told Andrea that he was going to kill her, and she begged for her life. She begged and begged. And like a sick and twisted game that Lawrence was playing, he asked Andrea to give him as many reasons as she could to spare her life, for him not to kill her. Playing this game, knowing well and truly that he's gonna kill her regardless of the reasons that she gives. But he was just further tormenting her, finding this funny for himself. And then he grabbed an ice pick from the toolbox and stabbed her in the ear with it. He stomped on the handle of the ice pick so hard that the handle broke off it. Then after he had done this, he strangled her to make sure that she was dead, and then threw her body over a cliff. This is some of the saddest things and most horrific things that I've ever heard a victim go through. Their third and fourth victim were done together. This happened just short of a month later. The two of them were driving around near the beach on the hunt for their next victims. As they were driving around, they spotted two girls. One of them was called Jackie and the other was called Leah. Jackie was just 15 years old at the time and Leah was only 13 years old. 13, like a baby, you know, so young. The two girls were sitting at a bus stop. They're sitting on a bench waiting for a bus. And the two of them approached them and offered them a ride home. And sadly, they accepted the ride. When they got in, Lawrence was driving and Roy offered the girls some marijuana and the girls accepted. As Lawrence was driving, the girls noticed that they were not going in the direction of where they needed to be dropped off. They were going a complete different direction towards San Gabriel Mountain. And so the girls were kind of like getting a bit worried. Instincts kind of kicked in. They were like, where are you guys taking us? And then Lawrence and Roy said, oh no, don't worry, you know, just giving excuses like this is a different way, blah, blah, blah. But the girls were not buying it. They were like, no, you're not taking us the direction that we need to go. You can't fool us. Where are you taking us? The girls did not believe them. And because they were so scared, Leah tried to escape through the passenger sliding door. But before she had the chance to escape, Roy got to her. He got a bag of lightweights that were under the bed and hit her over the head with them. And because of the impact, Leah was briefly knocked out. When Leah regained consciousness again, both of them tried to escape. While the girls were trying to escape, you know, they're kind of fighting, they're fighting back, they're trying to, you know, get out of this van. And there was a bit of struggle. And Roy was finding it difficult to tame the girls. So then Lawrence gets in the back and tries to help Roy. And with the help of Lawrence, they were able to overpower the girls. They bound them up and then Lawrence drove to the abandoned area. The girls were held for 2 days. It's not sure whether Leah, the 13-year-old, was raped or not, but Jackie 100% was. And for 2 days, they would torture the girls, they raped, and they just, oh, makes me so sad. They were so young. I'm trying to think about what I did when I was 13, 15 years old, you know, it's just, I can't even imagine going through something like that. They audio recorded the torturing and the rapes. They tortured the girls with pliers and a wire hanger, and it was just horrific. And to add to how sick Lawrence was, he at one point while he was raping Jackie said to her, ordered her to act as if she was his cousin. The two of them slept in the van with their victims. Roy and Lawrence would take turns to keep a lookout to see if anyone was coming or not. Lawrence even asked Roy to take photographs of him and Jackie, you know, nude and clothed. Some of the photos were with Jackie and some of them were just of Jackie alone. Lawrence would torture Jackie by stabbing her in the breasts with his ice pick, and also used pliers to tear off one of her nipples. When it was time to kill them, Roy said to Lawrence, we need to kill them quickly. You know, let's just get it done. And Lawrence was like, no, you know, they're only going to die once anyway. Like, let's make this fun. So then Lawrence, with the intention of killing Jackie, went and stabbed her in the ear with the ice pick. And he thought that this was going to kill her, but it didn't. So then both the men took turns in strangling her to kill her. And they did so until she died. After they killed Jackie, Leah was still in the van. They forced Leah out of the van. They said, go, be free. And Lawrence says, you know, you always wanted to be a virgin, so now you can die a virgin. Something along those lines. Such a horrible, horrible thing to say. And Leah thought, you know, I'm free, I can run, I can go. So she is given that glimmer of hope, of escape. But that was not the intention for the men. Of course it wasn't. All they would want to do is just add to this sick and twisted game that they enjoyed playing. They wanted to make these games as torturous as possible because that's what they found the fun in. So as she's leaving, Roy grabs his sledgehammer and hits her in the head with it. She didn't die from the impact. They thought that she had, but then they saw her open her eyes. So then Roy again took the hammer and just repeatedly hit her while Lawrence was strangling her. And then when Leah had died, they took both the bodies and threw it over a cliff with the ice pick still in Jackie's head. I just can't stop thinking about how young these girls were. After Jackie and Leah, they again went on the hunt for another woman. This woman's name was Shirley Sanders. Under a month later, on September 3rd, they saw Shirley and they kidnapped her. They forced her into the van and raped her. However, they didn't get to kill her because she managed to escape. As soon as she escaped, she went straight to the police. And the police actually showed a series of mugshots of a bunch of people that could be responsible. And straight away, out of all the mugshots, she identified Roy and Lawrence. Now there was hope in finding the two. At this point, there's been a series of missing persons reports of these girls. But before the police found them, they would go on to kill their final victim on Halloween night in 1979. This last victim's name was Shirley Ledford. Shirley was a 16-year-old girl who was hitchhiking after she had an argument with her boyfriend at a Halloween party they were at. So she left early and he and her boyfriend left early as well. They left separately. So she was waiting at this gas station just for someone to give her a ride home. She did look for a ride at the party, but she was unable to find anyone to drop her home. So that is why she resorted to hitchhiking. Lawrence and Roy see her at this gas station waiting and approach her. Now, it is said that Shirley actually recognized Lawrence because he was a regular customer at a restaurant that she worked part-time at. So she was kind of like, okay, maybe this is safe, maybe it's safe to go with them. So she went in the van and the guys offered her some marijuana, but she refused. They didn't take her home. They didn't take her where she needed to be. They instead took her to an abandoned road. Roy gets his knife to hold her hostage, and while he's doing that, she is bound and gagged with construction tape. Roy gets in the passenger seat and then drives around aimlessly while Lawrence is in the back with Shirley. Roy then removes the tape from her mouth. And then he slapped her, he mocked her, he beat her up with his hands. Shirley started screaming. And Lawrence is saying, scream louder, scream louder. And she kept screaming. And then he hit her. She cried, she pled for her life. She was pleading for her life. She was saying, no, don't touch me, stop touching me. And Lawrence, again, like this was a game to him, like he enjoyed every second of it, ordered her to scream as loud as she could, keep screaming. He struck her with a hammer, beat her up even more. They tortured her with pliers, they sodomized her, and they also raped her. This whole thing was audio recorded, and in the audio recording you can hear Lawrence rummaging through his toolbox looking for the tool that he wanted to use on her to torture her. Also in the recording you can hear Shirley screaming, pleading for her life. And because Roy was driving and Lawrence was doing all of this in the back, they then switch places. So Roy gets in the back and then Lawrence drives. Roy says to Shirley, go ahead, scream, or I'll make you scream. She pleaded, saying, I will keep screaming for you if you just stop hitting me. And then she screamed in a really, really high-pitched, guttural scream, just as Roy encouraged her to do. Then he encourages her to keep going, keep screaming, and then he orders her to stop. Then Roy grabs his sledgehammer. I feel like this was his weapon of choice. This was his tool of choice, and it was the ice pick for Lawrence. So he grabs his sledgehammer and she sees him grab it and she knows what's coming next. She knows that she's going to be hit. And in the audio recording, you can hear her saying, no, please don't. Then he takes a sledgehammer and strikes her on the elbow so hard. And Shirley's like, you've broken my elbow is broken. She was begging Roy, saying, please stop hitting me, don't hit me again. But he did, and he hit her 25 times on the same elbow. She was screaming. She was in so much agony, so much pain. And you can also hear in the audio, she was just crying. Lawrence beats her on her breasts, and he says that he was doing this to try to beat her breasts back into her chest. For 2 hours, these things continued. For 2 hours, she endured this pain, this agony, this torture. They then strangle her using a wire coat and pliers, the same way that they've been doing with their victims. Roy and Lawrence said that she didn't react much to the strangulation. However, when she died with her eyes open. Now, up until this point, they've been throwing their victim's body off cliffs. However, this time, to get a reaction out of the press, the news, they discarded her body on the front lawn of someone's house. They drove around and they picked out which house they were going to throw her body at. So when they found the house, they threw her body on a bed of ivy. And in the morning, her body was found by a jogger. There was trauma to her elbow, her face, her body. Her genitalia and rectum were torn, which was caused by Lawrence putting pliers into her body. This was the only body that was found at this point. All the other bodies were at the bottom of cliffs. Lawrence said that the only reason that they audio recorded this was so that they had evidence of a threesome. No words. I have no words. Like, they just wanted to hear this back just for fun, you know? He was just doing this just so that he could hear it back, like he was, you know, replaying his favorite movie. So after this, Roy had reacquainted with a former prison mate called Joseph Jackson, and when they got talking, Roy actually confessed everything to him, telling him what they had been doing for the past 5 months in graphic detail. Like, he went into detail about each and every victim. He also confessed to Joseph, saying that there were 3 other instances where they had attempted to rape and abduct and kill 3 other young women, but either they escaped or were released. So that's why I feel like there could have been more than what they're saying. So Joseph heard all this and it did not sit right with him. He was like, I need to alert someone. This is not okay. I can't let this go on after everything that I've heard. So Joseph went to his attorney and told him. It was like, what do I do? Do I tell the authorities? Like, what am I meant to do right now after knowing all this? His attorney was like, okay, yes, we need to tell authorities, obviously. So the attorney contacted the police, and he told the police what his client Joseph had heard from Roy. Police said that the description that Roy gave of these young women were really similar to some of the girls who were actually reported missing around this time over the 5 months. Roy also told Joseph that he and Lawrence actually sprayed mace into a woman's face who they forced into the van and then raped. And this also matched the report of a woman who reported 2 Caucasian men who sprayed, kidnapped and raped her. But when this woman had reported this, when it happened, because she thankfully was able to escape, the cops couldn't really go by anything because they weren't able to identify the 2 men. So nothing much was really done. So then when, you know, this whole thing came about with Roy and Lawrence, the police were like, okay, well, this could be the men. So they went up to this woman again, Robin, and showed her a series of mugshots, and without hesitation she picked out the 2 men that did this to her. Roy then was placed under heavy surveillance. The cops were onto him and they saw that he was dealing marijuana and that he violated his parole. So they were able to arrest him on the 20th of November in 1979. And Lawrence was arrested for the rape of Robin from his Burbank motel where he actually lived. Then there was a police lineup where Robin was given the opportunity to point out the 2 men. But unfortunately, for some reason, she was not able to positively identify Roy and Lawrence. I just wanted to add that it's crazy because she positively identified them when the police showed mugshots of them, but couldn't when it was the police lineup. So that was kind of not taken into account, because if you're not able to positively and confidently identify the men, you can't really just go, oh, okay, yeah, if she thinks it's this person, we'll charge him. Like, you need to be certain. But because you know, Roy and Lawrence were found to be dealing and violating their parole, they were able to be arrested and still held, because regardless, they still had other crimes that they had committed. Because Roy only confessed to Joseph, the police weren't sure that what Roy had confessed was 100% truthful. He could have just been making this up. So the police needed to find further evidence to prove that what he had confessed was actually true. So when they searched Lawrence's apartment, they found some of the Polaroid pictures that they had taken of their victims. And 2 of the girls that were in some of the Polaroids were reported as missing in that same year. They found a sledgehammer, they found a bag of light weights that they had under the bed in the van. They also had a book that educated people on how to locate police frequencies, which is totally illegal. They had a tub of Vaseline, and they had 2 necklaces that belonged to 2 of their victims. Lawrence also had in his possession some acidic material that he actually planned to use on his next victims. So from already horrific torture to like even more using acid. And then they also found the audio tape recordings. Shirley's mother, so their last victim's mother, actually heard the tape recordings just to identify whether this was her daughter. I can't even imagine like being a mother and having to listen to something like that, listen to the horrific, horrible last moments of your daughter's life. But when she did, she confirmed that this was in fact her daughter's voice. The police had also searched Roy's apartment, and they had found a bracelet belonging to Shirley that he had taken as a trophy. They also found Polaroid pictures. Most were non-consensual pictures of young women. There were hundreds of these Polaroid pictures. Hundreds. Some were taken at a high school that these guys were perving on young girls at, and some were taken around the beach area. At first, the 2 kind of denied any involvement in any of this.
Did you at any time ever use an ice pick?
No, sir.
You struck Miss Lamp with a sledgehammer. You recall the sledgehammer which was introduced?
Yes, sir, I recall
it. Was that true?
No, sir.
But then Roy kind of showed visible signs of distress. The police were sure that he would be the first one to break. There was so much evidence stacked up against him that there was no way that they could even lie about this. So Roy saw this as, okay, well, I'm screwed anyway, so I might as well start confessing. So he confessed. He said that Lawrence was more of the main perpetrator of these crimes. He said that the level of intensity with each of these crimes increased with each victim. As they got more and more confident with what they were doing, it just got worse and worse. He also said that everything that they did was mainly just for fun. Like they would approach girls, abduct them, rape them. The ones that actually were abducted and raped, a lot of them got killed. Some of them were able to escape or were released. He was just literally like confessing to everything, even it being just a game to them, like just for fun. How can you kill people and just see them suffer so much just for fun? Like, you are not a normal human being. He admitted to bludgeoning Leah with the sledgehammer. He admitted to hitting Shirley in the elbow before killing her. Just everything, every little detail that only they would know, he admitted to. Roy gave further evidence that he was the one to do these, or they were the ones to do these crimes, because he would give information, like I said, that only them 2 would know. Like Lucinda's shoe being fallen onto the pavement. Like, you know, she was leaving a church meeting, that Shirley and Lawrence kind of knew each other. He also said that Lawrence actually asked Shirley once on a date, but she declined, but I don't know if that's actually true. But he just knew all these pieces of information that no other person would know. Lawrence also very, very coldly confessed.
I touched Miss Ledford on the breast with the cold metal pliers, and if you listen to the tape, you'll hear those pliers being replaced in the toolbox a few seconds later.
Oh, what did you touch her on the breast for with a pair of pliers?
To shock her with the cold metal.
It's so eerie listening to him talk like that. It just seems like he's just carrying just a normal conversation, but he's actually admitting to such horrific things. Like, you almost can't even believe how cold he is in the face. They both were to be charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder. However, like I said, there could be more. Some of the Polaroid pictures that the police were looking at, they actually located quite a lot of the girls to be safe, but they didn't locate all of the girls. So I'm like, did they do more that they're not admitting to? I think there were like 19 girls from the Polaroid cameras that were never really like located or found. Not that they were reported missing, but they just couldn't locate them. Because they weren't able to identify them, they didn't really know that they had fallen victims of Lawrence and Roy or not. But because there was not like sufficient evidence to incriminate them with that, also they obviously couldn't charge them with the other 19 girls because they weren't even sure whether they were dead or alive. So Roy took the cops, the investigators, to the San Gabriel Mountains where they had said that they disposed of the bodies. But when they searched, they did an intensive search around the area. None of the bodies were found. None of them. So maybe Lawrence was right that animals had eaten their bodies, but there was not one. There was not one body. What about the skeletons? What about, you know, the plastic shower curtain that they had wrapped on one of the victims? Like, did they not find any evidence? Were they lying about taking the victims to San Gabriel Mountains? Was it somewhere else that they were taking the victims? They said that they were taking their victims there, but it wasn't fully, I guess, confirmed now because they couldn't find the evidence at the mountains. However, there were 2 bodies that they had put in the canyon that were found, but the other bodies, where were they? One of the bodies that they had found, remember how I said that Lawrence had stabbed her in the ear with the ice pick? When they had found that girl's body, the ice pick was still in her skull. Oh, it's like I can't even describe how horrific that would have been. Also on the skulls, you could see like hammer indents. So, you know, what Roy was saying was true to the cops. They were like, well, we need evidence to see if what you're saying is actually true. And everything he kind of said, most things were exactly what they found. On February 5th in 1980, both of them were formally charged of 5 murders. Lawrence denied bail. However, Roy's bail was set at $10,000, and obviously back then that was like a lot of money. Roy accepted a plea bargain to testify against Lawrence, and this plea bargain was that so he could avoid the death penalty. So he in court confessed to everything, confessed to his role and Lawrence's role, how they met, how they bonded in jail, what their plans were, what they did with the van, like every little piece of information that he didn't even need to confess to, he confessed to. So he pled guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of second-degree murder, 2 counts of rape, and 1 count of robbery. In court, again, Roy said that Lawrence was the main perpetrator, that for Roy it was more about the overpower and the having control over his victims, but for Lawrence it was like the torture aspect of it. He wanted to torture, like that's his main reason as to why he did this. But for Roy it was that and also the sexual side of it as well. He wanted to dominate his victims. Like he wanted that feeling of being powerful. The lengths that this man went to feed his ego is just like, I can't comprehend. He also said that Lawrence forced him to kill his first victim because at this point Roy had not killed anyone. So to equalize the crime rate, Lawrence forced him to kill. Apparently. Roy told the court that one time he actually tried to abduct and rape a woman, but it was unsuccessful as she escaped. And then he said that he told Lawrence about the incident, and Lawrence said, okay, from now to the future, we're going to do all abductions, kidnapping, and rapes together. In court, they played the 17-minute audio of Shirley's torture and murder. They played the entire 17 minutes. And before they played it, they said, for those of you who don't know what hell is like, you're about to find out. So you can imagine how horrible the tapes were. It was so confronting. The jury members were crying. They held their head down. Some people even rushed out of the courtroom. They couldn't listen to it anymore. There was like 100+ people in the courtroom, and some of them were just like walking out. They were horrified. It was like trauma for them, like psychological trauma. And a lot of them actually had like psychological trauma after hearing this. So, I mean, while it's evidence and it's important to see the raw nature of what these two devils did, these two demons did, I think playing a footage like that, they should have taken into account the psychological factors that could come of it. While the audio was playing, Lawrence was sitting in court laughing about it, laughing and carrying on as if he was enjoying this. If I was sitting there and I saw him do this, it would literally make me want to like jump across and just start pounding him in the face, like punching him in the face. Roy said that Lawrence would play this audio tape in the van all the time and he loved it. He thought it was real funny. He would literally play it as if you were playing the radio or music, like just listening to it for fun. And Lawrence loved every second of it. He had like absolutely no remorse whatsoever, no compassion, that this was the horrific screams and pleading of a woman begging for her life. How do you find this funny? Roy said that the only reason he did what he did was because it was out of fear of Lawrence, which is not an excuse at all. You still did it. You still found pleasure in it. So there's no way that it makes you look any better. He said that he enjoyed the rape part, but not the torture. How does that even make sense? How does that even make sense? As if it makes you look any better. If he says that he feared Lawrence, how come he showed no compassion or no remorse in court? He showed nothing. He was just normal. He was regarded as like beyond psychopathic, like beyond repair, beyond rehabilitation, like a cold murderer. He was sentenced to 45 years to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 2010. But he also declined to go to his parole meeting, which not sure why he did, but he declined it, which pushed back his ability to apply for parole for another 10 years. But he was not able to ever apply for parole again because he actually died of natural causes on February 4th in 2020. He was 72 years old. I am glad that he never got to see another second of the real world, of the outside world, ever again. I'm so glad. Lawrence was charged on April 24th in 1980. He was charged with 29 counts of kidnapping, rape, sodomy, oral copulation, murder, unlawful possession of a firearm, and attempted murder. Lawrence showed no remorse for any of the crimes, anything like that. He was only sad because he and Roy had been caught and had to spend their lives in jail, saying that this ruined their lives, as if they hadn't just ruined the lives of so many people, taken people's lives. All he cared about was, damn, I'm not going to be able to go out there and do this again. Lawrence also said that Roy and him did not have much in common while they were in jail together, like when they first met, but now they had a hell of a lot in common, an actual piece of. Lawrence was silent when the judge asked him how he pled, refused to answer any questions, he was just sitting there in silence. So the judge actually pled for him non-guilty, pled non-guilty for him. Pleading non-guilty would actually give a chance of a higher sentence. Pleading guilty kind of reduces the sentence. So that's what happened with Roy, because he pled guilty. Whereas because the judge pled not guilty for Lawrence, the chance of his sentence to be higher was a lot greater, which I'm not mad at. Lawrence was sentenced to death, and if by any chance that sentence got taken off him, he was given 199 years and 4 months in prison. So there was no way this man was ever going to get out of jail. He loved the fame, put that extremely lightly, that he got with this. He did a lot of interviews on death row. He was milking the fame. He was loving the fame. He was using this as such an advantage of his. I feel like they shouldn't have given him any interviews, because this made it more of a game for him. This made it like he still had control over the victims, that he was able to talk about everything in such a nonchalant manner. He received letters while he was in jail, and he would often reply to these letters as if it was like fan mail. I'm thinking, who is sending him letters? Why do you want to send a letter to this man? Anyway, he would answer these letters and sign them off as pliers Bittica. Still taking this as a joke. He naturally died on death row on December 13th, 2019. Yes, 2019. He was on death row for that long. He was never executed. He kept appealing his execution date and it kept getting pushed back to the point where he was never executed. I don't know why these things take such a long time, but I feel like it shouldn't have taken that long and he shouldn't have died of natural causes. That's just my opinion. Yes, I said it. That's just what I feel. It's unfortunate that he got to live for so long. He died at 79, almost 80 years old. He had a long life and did not spend 1 second of it fearing for his life like his victims did theirs. Okay, this bit gets really sad also, but the chief investigator of this case in 1987 actually committed suicide, and he left a 10-page lengthy note mentioning the murders and how it caused him so much distress, and said that it haunted him so much that he couldn't live with this anymore and that he feared that the two would get out of jail. And he decided to take his life because it haunted him that much. That was so sad when I read that, because I can't believe that these men did this to so many people, even people that weren't even victims of his. The audios that they recorded are actually now used for FBI training. This is used to desensitize future agents and help them with their training, you know, just to see the raw reality of. So of course my camera died, but that was the end of the case anyway. Like I was saying, you know, the audio footage is actually used to show the raw reality of situations like this, and this is to help future agents with cases like these. That's a wrap, guys. That was the case for this week. I know it was super confronting, super graphic, and just sickening and sad and gruesome. I feel for these victims and I feel for their families as well, especially because they had so much life ahead of them to live, and it was just taken away in such a cruel, horrific manner. Anyways, guys, please let me know your thoughts about this case down in the comments below. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It will help me out so much. Please leave any case suggestions down below and I'll be happy to look into them. Until my next video, guys, please stay happy, please stay amazing, please stay positive, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.